This is the Very Not Normal podcast with me, Frieda Vizel, and this is episode 11. For episode 11, I am doing something different, a little recording every day of the week to compile a bit of an audio journal, which I'm titling Extremely Offline. I think that will give it away. Listen on to hear the daily recordings. Hello, my friends. I hope you are all doing well. And for this podcast episode, I want to do something very different. I want to do sort of an audio journal for just a few days where I chart my efforts to stay offline as much as is possibly possible. And I want to do this because I think that recording periodic updates will keep me honest and will motivate me to try really hard to not make a fool of myself and to show that I have a little restraint. And I really could use the motivation, and I really want to find it in me to push myself to refrain from that tendency to turn to the internet when I'm exhausted, when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm stressed, and to sort of work through that. I don't know if this is going to be interesting to anyone. In fact, I don't really know if any of my episodes, I never know. I do them with a hope that I could share with others what I find so valuable in finding, especially resources-wise. And what drives me to do this is definitely not that I want to be controversial or that I am interested in picking fights. I really don't like that whole thing, and I am sure I score very high on any test on agreeableness, and I avoid conflict at all costs. I do this because I spend a ton of time looking for good articles and looking for ideas and looking for people who are not just sort of knee-jerk adding on to the pile of the glut of information. So I kind of feel like I hope I can pay it forward, but I also know that it is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. It is not going to be most people's cup of tea, and I am only trying. So I tell myself, you know what? Maybe an audio journal is a little, I don't know. I think it can't hurt to give it a try and see, what comes of it. Today is the 17th in the afternoon, and the reason I really want to go offline now is because I feel like I'm at that point of having gone through a few weeks of a lot of stimulation where I begin to not really be able to hear myself think. And I have been on this planet here long enough to know that that's a very big red flag. Once I start to have that foggy, extremely overstimulated state, I begin to automatically watch what I say and become very aware of what other people think. That's really what it is. I become extremely aware of what other people think, and I start to speak accordingly. And while in the beginning it's very minor how much you self-censor, after a while that goes down a road. You self-censor yourself a little bit in order to earn favor with people that are now in the fore of your mind. Maybe they said something nice and you really appreciated it, and now you're thinking, well, if I'll say this, maybe I'll lose them. So you start to watch what you're saying, and once you start to self-censor, then you are not quite sure what you should say, and now you're looking to them and you're overthinking everything. I'm pretty sure that everyone has this to some degree. I mean, most people, I am sure. I suppose some people will insist that they are impervious to social influences. In my experience, everyone I know is influenced by social experiences, but I think I am especially afflicted with this And I think I blame my background, my childhood, and I don't know if rightly so. I have no idea. We all have these ways of pointing fingers on our shortcomings and on the past. And for me, probably the way in which I do this the most is when I find myself trapped in an inability to articulate what I think and going along with things that I really don't want to go along with, smiling and nodding and smiling and nod, that frozen smile, and then not being able to backtrack and suddenly being imprisoned and not being able to talk. And I think it has a lot to do with, from a young age, I was really, really taught that if you say anything that just comes to your mind, if you don't first look at what other people think, if you don't carefully read facial expressions and second and third guess yourself again and again, if you just speak your mind, then you will suffer terrible consequences. I like to be accepted in groups. I don't like to draw attention to myself as a contrarian. So the outcome of that for me, being at once strong-headed, but on the other hand, extremely eager to fit in, has been that I internalized like second nature, prioritizing other people's thoughts over my own. So if I think something is silly, but you think it is extremely rude and stupid to say it's silly, then I have internalized to give preferential treatment to you and to not say what I think, even though slowly I have come to a place where I know that there are people who will accept that I can voice what I think in contrast to what they believe, and we can still be friends. But the fear of rejection runs so deep for me that I can't hear myself think if I don't have enough room and time to think. And by thinking, I don't mean smoking a pipe and having thought bubbles. I don't mean taking a walk in the woods and having deep thoughts. The process of thinking is to not think, to not consciously engage in narrative making, in trying to present your case. It is about just going to the store, cooking dinner, playing Stardew Valley, having a meal, hanging out with friends, walking the dog, chatting with dog owners, etc., doing these mundane things, and in the process, hearing yourself, getting the freedom to say, well, it's not a big deal if someone else disagrees. It's fine. I will still say what I want. It's not the end of the world. It creates distance between yourself and the mob, and that allows you to accept your thoughts and to bring them to maturity. I say you, but I mean entirely me. And I'm aware that it's a red flag that I'm thinking of self-narrating my offline time in a podcast episode. I think that in itself is an example of obstructing your ability to be in the world. But desperate times, and hopefully I will do this just for a couple of days for my next podcast episode. So let me go and I will report back tomorrow. Day 2. Day 2 of Frieda's audio journal. It's Thursday, February 18, I suppose, because yesterday was 17. It is snowing outside my window in Brooklyn. Big, white, soft flakes coming down since early morning, and it's now noon and it's still coming down. Really, I picked the right day to do this. I don't think removing yourself from the internet is just a snap. You turn it off and you immediately reach a zen point. Wow, now I'm in this snowy paradise. But it worked out for me this time to sort of have a reward along the way. In Yiddish, we have an expression, bis ein Kretsch mit darf man noch trink. Until you get to the bar, the pub, you still need something to drink along the way. So this has been that, because I woke this morning and usually I would just sort of look at the snow. But because I was not even touching anything, it kind of, I find that I end up spending a lot more time outside, moving around more, cleaning more, but also relaxing more. I finished a puzzle and I lit the aromatic candles. We have some really great candles that are smelling up the house as I speak, and the color lighting that we have, and a hot cup of apple cider and Christmas music in the end of February. Yes, I am Jewish and I love Christmas music, but since it is in February, it's fine. So that was really nice. I walked to the park and it's very lovely, and there's a kind of just a sleepy sweetness to that feeling of not having that chaos and not having that pull, because I knew I cannot go on the internet. I can't make excuses because then I won't be able to do this. So let me explain to you what I am doing. I always am trying to go offline, always. And I have various impediments on my iPad to try to discourage me from going online. Specific things I blocked, which takes some effort to unblock. And every additional step that it takes to get to the internet or to get onto Facebook is another opportunity to sort of stop and think if I want to do this. So I will, for instance, log out of all of my accounts almost all the time, and I won't know my password, so I'll have to reset it. So I do these things, but I still need to go online. I won't be on social media, or I'll tell myself I won't comment on anything. But if, let's say, I am putting together the resources for a podcast and I am remembering this article I read about mind-brain differences, and I don't remember exactly where it was, I start to look, and now I'm reading everything in the New York Times. We have a subscription to the New York Times from my son's school, so that's very helpful. So suddenly I'm reading the Times and I'm reading the comments, and it's 2 hours later. So even though I say I'm not going to go online only for work, it becomes hours and hours and hours and hours of reading things. And even though I try really hard not to go into the center of the boiling inferno that is the internet, and even though I try not to get dragged into the worst of the conversations, I still always find things that will get a rise out of me, which is the entire business model of the internet, just getting you upset all the time and keeping you coming back for more. So for instance, to give you just one example, I will block my Safari, but I have an app where I read articles, and that app actually has a browser, so I will start to say, okay, I'm just going to take a break, read some articles, but then use that browser to read more than articles, and I'm in the comment section, I'm getting upset, and I'm already trying to set up an account. I even sometimes say I'm just not going to go on to anything. I am going to be offline on my iPad, and I'm only going to use the internet on my flip phone. It is a flip phone. And yet, this is how little restraint I have and how easily I can be pulled in. I have figured out how to use my flip phone to leave comments. So if you ever encounter on the internet a comment, the letter U, the letter R, GR, and the number 8, it's probably me fervently on my flip phone typing out my all-important comment. It's so stupid. So my plan here is to not read anything on my iPad and not to do anything on it except for when I'm going to go out of the house to somewhere where there's internet to answer my emails and to set up for meetings I have. And when I have a Zoom meeting, of course, I have to do it in the house. That's the extent of it. But the times that I most turn to this crutch, for instance, at night when I'm about to go to sleep, and you're like, what am I supposed to do in this bed here? I just lie here. So it's something that I'll do at night or first thing in the morning. So I won't be using the internet any of those times except the allocated 1 or 2 windows when I'll leave the house to do some work. I find that the most tempting part, or the time that you sort of get most pulled in, is transitions. Okay, you're done with a big project, you want to take a break, eat something. It makes sense to now sit down and read a little bit, and then it's 2 hours later This is something I've realized when I am offline, that suddenly I have more day to my day because my breaks are much shorter. How long can you have breakfast? How long can you take a break before you start the next thing? And how long can you read the cereal box? Remember those? When we used to be looking for things to read and we'd read anything. So I'm trying. I'm really trying. I'll tell you what I mean by thinking, by hearing yourself think. When I say I can't hear myself think, or how the internet obstructs our ability to hear ourselves think, I don't mean it in the I can't think of an article I want to write, or I can't pontificate over is it a Hobbesian world or is it a Lockean world? Was Rousseau right or was it Kant? Or whatever bullshit, pretentious stuff. I don't mean it in the deep thinking way. I mean it in the sense of hearing our instinctual, our intuitive, our not in a wishy-washy sense and aura. No. In the sense of knowing what we, out of experience in life, sense and being able to suss it out and know it. They say that one of the red flags in a relationship is if that person rushes you very much. Call me back, respond. So do you want to get married? So do you want to go out? Do you want to live together? The reason it is a red flag is because they are very eager to move on with a relationship and they don't want you to think about it, because if you have time to think about it, maybe you won't want it. And they are not a good person. They are not good for you because they don't want you to reject them, even if that's in your best interest. A good person will respect that you need to do whatever is in your own best interest, but an abusive person or a narcissistic person will have no regard for what's in your best interest. They just want you to do what's in their best interest. And in their best interest at the moment, since they are smitten with you, is that you should get married with them right away. Tomorrow we're eloping in Vegas. Of course, this is not a cardinal rule. Nothing is set in stone, and sometimes people can be good people and rush things. But the underpinning idea behind be wary of someone who is rushing you is the importance of hearing yourself think. Hearing yourself think is vital to just being able to have autonomy. This is another part of my pet peeve of humans are not machines. We don't just wake up and say, oh, I'm a freedom-loving American. And as soon as we mouth these words, we know exactly what kind of freedom we want. We don't know if freedom is for us the freedom to go somewhere or to stay home. If the freedom is the freedom to be in certain relationships or institutions or work environments or not to. In order for us to know what we want, we need to have a lot of time to think. And the entire internet culture is not allowing us to think. I think we are a completely reactive species by now. All we are doing is reacting everything in our lives, our reactions to cues. People make us feel jealous on the internet. So we do something about it by, let's say, showing that we are not a nobody by enrolling in school, by starting a job, by announcing some sort of personal identity shift, or by getting into relationships. I think all of these things are now coming out of a very, very reactive place because it's so hard to hear yourself think on the internet. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just me. I only have subject A for my experiment. But for me, for subject A, it's vital to have time to hear myself think, especially since I'm an introvert. And especially since I have that baggage we know of, and I therefore need a lot of time to think. I really dislike the whole Cal Newport brand of going offline. Cal Newport is like the darling of the press, the spokesperson of going offline. And what really rubs me the wrong way, like I have a really bad feeling about his entire style, is it's optimize yourself for maximum productivity and prestige and outcome. in order to achieve this optimal state, you must go offline for 6 hours and work in a locked room, churn out an essay, churn out a book, and then you go online for hours on end to see all the accolades. What makes me feel so yuck when I read it is this: everything is done so that you can flaunt for other people, ha, I am better now. It's another version of the Silicon Valley mob of attention seekers. It's just a subversion of it. It's, here's a new way. Everyone is running in that direction. You all, my little herd of wise guys, of smarter than everyone, we are running in the other direction, and therefore we are going to have less traffic and we will succeed. Haha, we outdid the system. I absolutely do not like that entire motivation. That is not what drives me to stay offline. What drives me to stay offline is to stop narrating my mind to sort of a public. It's like when you have a really big crush on someone. Again, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm really weird and I'm talking about myself, but I think I might not be the only one. When you have an infatuation with someone, you find yourself in your head talking to them about everything and spinning everything into a way that you can present it to them. This is the effect of a lot of strain on our psyche, sort of, and it is sort of our permanent state with the constant interaction with our crush, the internet. So I go offline really for being able to get to a place where I feel more immersed and less egocentric and more sort of apart than an observer. I have no idea if any of this makes sense, but see, this is a journal, so I speak my mind. The last thing I want to say about this that's on my mind on the moment is more about what I was talking about yesterday, my feeling that maybe I'm not doing the right thing here. And what makes me a bit queasy is that I don't like the entire genre of having experiences so you can write about them. Just now when I was doing the episode on transhumanism, I was reading all these articles about sensory deprivation, all of these New York City, highly educated, highly successful, looking for problems so they can write about solutions, people who get paid in order to promote these extremely ridiculous, everyday, a new idea for how you can torture your body because your life is so utterly dull. And the writing is a promotion of these complete nonsenses. I cannot get any coverage from my tours, but by God, you must keep doing articles on sensory deprivation and every kind of new hot and cold yoga and poking needles and other such things. And B, besides being a promotion, it's also for the writer supposed to be a grist for the journalism, the churning out. Get it? Pun, the churning out, this journalism that is absolutely writing about nothing and is so clearly only written for this very small demographic that lives in various neighborhoods in Brooklyn and in Manhattan and in Queens. And when I was looking at the sensory deprivation articles that I remembered reading about and I wanted to refresh my memory, it's just incredible how many reporters all went through the same stupid ass useless experience of lying in a coffin and telling us whatever nonsense. It's not even interesting. They then do these narrative arcs of how tortured they were and, the irony of the Brooklyn funny and, the nihilism. Bah. No good. I think of the genre as epitomized by the Eat, Pray, Love book, which is Elizabeth Gilbert got paid a huge advance to make her relationship falling apart into a real-life Shakespearean drama and travel to all sorts of exotic locations and churn out of that extremely superficial reflections and all the ups and downs of eating this and eating that. And it feels to me so dishonest or so performative. So, hello, I'm putting together, it's not real. It's not real. And I think we all can get trapped in this not real by social expectations and by social incentives. And I don't like it. It makes me unhappy. But I tell myself that doing this audio journal, for instance, is different because I'm not going offline so I can use that as fodder for a podcast, but rather I'm using it as fodder for a podcast so I can go offline. So that's a very different experience. But still, I've got my guard up. All right, now I'm going to go make a list on pen and paper of things I need to do for the rest of the day. And I will see what then. I don't know. That's a part of going offline, is every few minutes I ask myself, what am I supposed to do? Now what? Because usually I would spend some time online, which feels like 2 minutes, but it's really a few hours until it comes to me. But not today, my friends. Not today. I'll be back. Day 3. Here's what I'm thinking. Orthodox Jews and smoking. This is a fascinating thing, that Orthodox Jews that smoke are not allowed to smoke on the Shabbos. Shabbos is from Friday at sundown until Saturday night, when Jews are supposed to rest and you're not allowed to do a whole bunch of things. And one of them is you're not allowed to light a fire. And since you're not allowed to light a fire, you're not allowed to smoke. I know Orthodox Jews who smoke, only men. I don't know any women who smoke. But I know some men who smoke who are fairly, relatively decently able to get through the Shabbos without smoking. But as soon as Shabbos is over, they must have a cigarette. If you ask them to wait another few hours until Sunday morning, it's out of the question. They must have their cigarette at the end of Shabbos. Why? Why can they go for the entire Shabbos and not a few more hours after Shabbos? This is part of the entire subject of addiction that is so mind-boggling. It looks like addiction is such a powerful force. It feels like it leaves you with no choice. They create these obsessions, and yet, if we are in the habit of not engaging in something for a set amount of time, then it can be almost like we turn off the addiction. I'm not comparing my time online with the addiction of smoking. I don't know that I can speak to the brain chemistry of addiction to internet. There's very little accessible neuroscience research information for lay people. I don't know how much research there's done altogether on the effect of the constant stimuli on the internet on our brains. But what I do find so interesting is that I can go a whole day out of the house without internet and I can be completely fine with it, because the only smart device I have, is this extremely large iPad. And I have it because for my tours, not that I'm giving any, but I need to have a portable demonstration. I would have never gotten a portable device otherwise. I would have gotten a desktop, but I have this iPad, and if I leave the house, I just take my flip phone and I don't have the iPad on me. And I am completely fine. I'm not bored. I'm not itching. I'm not thinking about it. When I get home, though, I must go to certain people's websites that I follow, blogs, people who have criticism, like John Stepling, who I really like, or architects, social housing, Simon Elmer, who I also really like. And I will sort of by habit check out all of these websites. And it takes incredible self-restraint and also agitation and probably eating to numb the need to go online if I try to break the habit. That's the problem I have with the internet, with being at home, that it's become this crutch in every moment of sort of boredom or transition. And my problem, and what I'm doing here, is really about breaking that habit, which I have a problem with. But thinking about Orthodox Jews and smoking and all of that makes me think about the power of habit, which is another one of my pet peeves and is much larger than this little update. And one day maybe I'll do an episode on habit as a biological mechanism, which really interests me, the rooster crowing and all of that. How much do we need habit? How quickly can we throw out habit with the virtual 24/7, which we are throwing it out and replacing it with willpower? So I think really what this is for me here is about breaking a habit rather than anything really else. So how that breaking the habit is going. I have only been online for one block yesterday, and by not being online, I mean I have not even touched my iPad for the most part, and it was great. It was fine. It was wonderful, and I wasn't bored. I wasn't euphoric. I wasn't anything. It was just, I don't know. But I have not been on my messages. I have not checked in on anything, and it is Friday afternoon. I have a Zoom meeting soon, so I have to quickly catch up on my emails, and I'm terrified of what I have waiting over there. I'm always nervous that it's a bunch of angry people because I don't reply. But this is really the extent of my even thinking about this whole thing at this moment. It's really about, I have all those emails I have to check, and I hope no one is upset at me. But that's about it. I'm going to go now, and soon we'll have Shabbos. I don't really observe Shabbos in the traditional sense, but tonight after candlelight and after a little meal, we're going to play Stardew Valley, and it's going to be hopefully a nice time. So I'll fill you in again soon. Day 4, Saturday. It's Saturday, it's Shabbos. I just had coffee and cheesecake with a friend, which is very appropriate for the weekend, and all is well. The world didn't fall apart. I checked my inbox yesterday once and it was completely fine, and I haven't checked anything since. Just been offline, and just now I got a magazine in the mail, which is very exciting because I've been running down to the building mailbox to refresh my mailbox about 3 times in the day or 5. And it was extremely well timed to get a magazine, a paper magazine. So this magazine is the Yiddish language magazine Veket. Veket is Yiddish for the passive term of being woken. And in the name, you can hear the subversive ambitions of this magazine. Veket is produced by Hasidic, I think, largely Hasidic men or only Hasidic men. It is in Yiddish. It is sold and bought in the community, but it pushes the envelope on what is acceptable in the community by, for instance, including pictures of women, but more importantly, by coming at topics in ways that are considered the non-Hasidic way, or coming from the worldly, bringing in the worldly to open up the Hasidic. But it's often also a very specific kind of worldly, a New York Times kind of worldly. For instance, the cover story here is how American Jews suffered from the coronavirus many times more than our neighbors, and how we ignored the tens of deaths from the second wave. And this is a whole centerfold story with charts, advanced use of charts, etc. Obviously, this is not the right opportunity to go into this article. It's extensive and I don't agree with it. And I think it comes from the ideology of a veneration of experts and also very narrow focus using narrow variables. I don't want, though, to open that can of worms when I can't give a full explanation to where I come from. But there are many other articles here, and some of them are refreshing and sweet. And there's a poem that I liked, and there's one on technology that I very much liked. But also, see on page 45 on the bottom, it says, I'm going to be reading, sort of translating as I read from Yiddish to English. The well-known tour guide Frieda Vizel, who was interviewed in Wecker number 17, which I was indeed, started a new podcast called The Very Not Normal Podcast, where she covers subjects around conformism, media coverage on Hasidim, critic on media, I don't know the word they're using, that covers Hasidim, like the show on Orthodox, and a defense on the Hasidim who didn't support the corona lockdown. It's very fair. I feel like this is a good summary of where I come from, except I don't know what the word kina means. And then they go on to quote someone else who on a Yiddish forum was describing my podcast, I think also fairly generously, giving me a fair chance, perhaps maybe even surprising me. I've actually been very positively surprised by the reaction I've gotten from the Hasidic online community or the former Hasidic online community in recent months or to my podcast. The online Hasidic community is not the Hasidic community. The Hasidic community that I meet in the streets has a very different feel, and to me was a very, very dramatically different experience than the online Hasidic community, which is comprised of these forums, these places on the internet like WhatsApp, Facebook, or Instagram, Twitter, where Hasidim meet to talk, and they talk a lot about, naturally, references to the community, but often these conversations are either subversive or rebellious or critical of the community. And there are sort of a set of common assumptions in these groups which everyone abides by largely. For instance, that Hasidim were wrong in the coronavirus action, and they, with their primitive ways, have caused, it'll be written in bloody letters, it says in one of these articles here. That's how the author described the Hasidic community's guilt. There's an anger at the community, or there is an anger at specific parts of the community, and they're all channeled through often very narrow, acceptable prisms. One of them is blaming the community about the coronavirus. Another is blaming people's economic difficulties on the men's education. This is where I went awry because I had problems with this narrative. I felt that it was more something that everyone can be angry about than a genuine, honest exploration of the economic difficulties that are real, and that as well as the educational difficulties that Hasidim face. I just felt like the stories they were telling, the constant finding the pincushion to blame on, were very simplistic, and I disagreed with it. This is some years ago, and this community, this online Hasidic community, was my primary online community. If I posted something, they were the ones who responded. They were the ones who read. They were the ones who shared, who complimented or ignored. And by the time I talked about my views on education, I was already 1 foot out of that community because it had become very narrow. Everyone was saying the same 3 sets of things, and the race was who can get these things posted, shared, or published in a more prestigious, popular outlet, and then everyone would fall over themselves with respect without even really reading or contemplating what you had said, which to me was feeling incredibly stifling and suffocating. It was off for me, and I was already off Facebook most of the time. And then I shared an article I wrote in the tablet about education, and they came at me like a pack of hyenas. It was like attacks from all ends, and everyone was piling on. I was the woman who doesn't want children to have an education, and one friend or acquaintance who I had known in person told a charity organization that he's pulling his donation because that charity organization had shared my article. And because I was still fairly oriented towards this community and I still sort of went in for the argument, I still went in for the debate again and again, and I tried to explain myself, and I just opened myself up for more attacks, and no one heard me. I am sure that they would say I was fair game for attack because I sort of initiated it by writing that article, and because I had already sort of turned my back on the community by going offline. And perhaps, but be that as it may, I got very burnt, very burnt, and I have my guard up. I don't trust this demographic. I feel like there's a lot that if you say it, you unleash the pack that comes at you and uses each other as validation and as a way to avoid really engaging with your material. Instead of really engaging with your material, they convene with each other, find easy ways to laugh, dismiss, or just personalize some insult. Which is a long way to say, I suppose this is what the internet does to communities. It makes it homogenous. Slowly it narrows everything and it becomes narrower and narrower. But the other thing I wanted to say is I've been pleasantly surprised and extremely grateful. I want to say to anyone from this world out there who has been giving me a chance and who has been listening with an open mind that it means a lot to me. It means a lot to me because it's definitely been extremely traumatic. I don't know, maybe I'm using too big a word, to be rejected from this community as well. So I'm gonna go and read a little more and get started with my day. Guess what? I am doing my taxes. Yay. Hello, it's day 6 of my audio offline journal. I actually checked nothing since my one block on Friday. I have no idea what's happening in the world, but I am pretty certain that for 2 days, it's not falling apart. A few months ago, or maybe more, probably more, when I was still running a busy business, I took a week offline and I set up an autoresponder, which apparently I hadn't set up correctly because it didn't actually respond. It only responded intra-company to my own company mates, which I have none. So anyone who was not in the company didn't get the auto response. And I am like, having a nice time, a week offline, feeling sort of refreshed, recentered. And I come online and there's pages of emails and people pay me money. So it's like, I need to add someone to my party. I need to take someone off from my party. I need to reschedule. I need to know if you're available then or there. You didn't respond. Oh my, it was so stressful. I was like, so sorry. I am so sorry. How many sorries do I have still? I will give you all of my sorries. People were mostly pretty understanding, but until I responded, not so much. Where are you? Why aren't you responding? So I suppose this is one of the benefits because I don't get that onslaught. I don't get that I'm not working with people's travel plans. I don't have to be on as much. So it's been so good. It's been so great. I sleep better. I eat better. I eat more. I am pretty sure I gained 2 pounds because I have more time to eat. I'm less sort of tranced out. But I altogether feel like I go from project to project more effectively. I go from finishing my taxes to, okay, now I'm cooking dinner, to playing a board game. My son had to do a board game for DDP, which is the name of a class they have. It's design and engineering something class. And he had to design a board game. So I was recruited as the game tester to try the game again and again to see if we needed to change any point systems. And I'm not a big board game person. I play games more like the way I play Candy Crush. I press things. Press. I never think. It is so annoying for anyone to watch me because I'm just, I don't know. I'm just pressing things while I'm listening to something or I'm thinking. But I was able to sort of play. We played a whole bunch of rounds and it was nice. I think it's actually quite a good game. It's coming together really nicely. I also put together a podcast response to the Vizel article, which is going to be in Yiddish and English. I have no idea if there's even an audience for it, who would be interested in it, but it was also something that I will find myself getting busy with things that aren't necessarily useful, productive. So I guess that's the result of the experiment. It's like a vacation. Maybe I'll just keep dragging it on. Day 8, Wednesday morning. Am I still counting? Not exactly. Have a lot of work. Feel like I can only do so much of this so long. But I'm looking at the recordings now, getting it ready, and it strikes me that I'm not sure that it comes through what it's like to not check the news and not read any articles. I read a lot of articles every day and not touch my iPad. My iPad use went down 25%, and this is with using it for recording and for my taxes. And being around friends and everyone is touching their phones, I'm used to that a little bit. But on the whole, it was a very, very stark change to simply not entertain myself on a device, to not read on a device, to read physical books, to not scroll comment sections. It was a very, very stark change. I'm not sure, maybe to some people this wouldn't be a big deal. A lot of people are much better naturally at moderation, but it felt very different, and I miss reading my articles the most. I miss a good juicy read. Nothing like a good juicy read. A few good long reads, delicious articles. Makes my day. Does this medium, the podcast, capture the experience? I have a feeling that not. But it was a very good one for me, and although I'm going to try to drag it out a little bit, I also look forward to reading and to working on more substantive material for my next podcast. We shall see. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Very Not Normal podcast with me, Frieda Vizel. If you liked it, please consider spreading the word, liking, subscribing, sharing. You can also leave me feedback by going to my anchor.fm page. There is a link in the episode description of how to get to it. I'm also including in the episode description links to other sources I'm mentioning in the podcast so you can do your further deep dives. If you would like to, you can also check out my other work at friedavizel.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.